All right, we got to talk about this human sniper safari stuff that was happening in Sarajevo during the Bosnian War, because this is some of the darkest stuff I've read in a long time. We all know that rich people have crazy hobbies, because once you get that much money and you just have like so much money you don't know what to do with it, people start doing risky behavior like contributing in human trafficking and dark web stuff and weird other things that I'm not going to list here because it'll get the video demonetized. But apparently there's been a new report that's been revealed and unveiled by the Italians who've been conducting an investigation that have unearthed some pretty dark stuff about the Battle of Sarajevo involving rich people paying for sniper safaris, essentially spending money to go join Bosnian Serb forces in sniping at defenseless civilians. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because this is the craziest story I have heard in quite some time. So back in April of 1992 until February of 1996, there is a siege at the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia, which is the Bosnian capital, that has been under investigation by authorities in Europe for quite some time. And Italy has discovered that there was a grotesque, vile thing happening there that a lot of people didn't realize, known as sniper tourism, or human safaris, which is about what you would imagine like when rich people go on safaris in Africa, except they were sniping humans. This sounds like something you would literally find on the dark web. It sounds like it can't possibly be real. It's unbelievable. Now, this wasn't just like some wartime atrocity. This was like an allegedly paid thrill for the ultra wealthy, where civilians, men, women, children, the elderly, became targets for rich people in a game of sport, like some macabre game of sport. Italian prosecutors in Milan have now launched a formal investigation into claims that affluent Westerners, primarily Italians, but also people from Germany, France, the UK, the US, and even Russia, shelled out sums equivalent to like 80,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds, 116,000 pounds to join the Bosnian Serb forces in sniping at defenseless residents from hilltop positions overlooking the city. Now, these trips that were often referred to by the people that were doing them as weekend excursions for gun enthusiasts, basically similar to like African big game hunts, were actually something far more depraved and disgusting, because people were literally paying money not only to shoot uniformed men, women, elderly, but also to shoot children, which cost a lot more money because if you're going to do that, they wanted to take more money from you. But how disgusting is that? I am never surprised at the depravity of humankind anymore. I'm just not. It's crazy. It's crazy to me that there are people out there that are so vile that they were literally paying people money not to go fight in war, but to just go snipe people because they wanted to have the experience. Like, this is why there's a lot of rich people out there that have some real dark pasts that are in their closets that people don't know about. And I'm sure this stuff is still happening today. I'm sure this is on the dark web. You could probably do this out in Africa, I bet. I bet there's places in Africa that people can offer money to go do that. Although I'm not encouraging that because this is disgusting, you know. But anyway, this investigation, which opened in 2025, is threatening to reopen a lot of the wounds that took place in the early 90s during the Battle of Bosnia in Sarajevo, which claimed the lives of over 11,000 people in Sarajevo alone, not even including the rest of the cities in Bosnia, including more than 1,500 children. 1,500 children. It's so insane. And the investigation that they opened could potentially lead to charges of voluntary homicide aggravated by cruelty and abject motives. Now, to be able to like really wrap your head around the horror that is these sniper safaris, you really have to understand like what was going on in Sarajevo during the 1,425-day encirclement of the city. Now, Bosnian and Serb forces who were loyal to Radovan Karadzic, who was later convicted of genocide and crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, they had positioned artillery and snipers on surrounding hills like Trebevic and Mojmilo, and the city, which at the time was a multicultural mosaic of like Muslims, Croats, Serbs, and others, were completely encircled and cut off from the rest of the world. They had 380,000 residents that were there subjected to artillery bombardment and sniper fire on a daily basis, And daily life, just getting to and from work, became a deadly gauntlet. Just getting water, in the line for bread, or just crossing the street potentially put you in the sights of a sniper in the area that was paying money to shoot at you. Now, there's a specific location inside of Sarajevo that was referred to as the infamous, quote, Sniper Alley, which is a stretch of Mesa Selimovic Boulevard that led to Sarajevo's airport. And this place was like a killing ground where there were trams that were shattered under bullets, buses that were riddled with holes, and warning signs all over the place telling people to crouch and sprint if they were on that road or that thoroughfare. There were kids that would play games of like dodging sniper fire out there. Families buried loved ones in makeshift graveyards there. Something that it's just unthinkable in like a first world society, right? You'd think that you'd see something like this in like Somalia, but this is like in Europe. And this wasn't during World War II. This wasn't during World War I where there was open war. It was just an encircled city that were being shot at and shelled every day in the 90s. And this really doesn't get talked about because it wasn't a big war. Not a lot of people know about this stuff. In any case, over the siege during this time, snipers killed or wounded thousands of people, turning that urban sector of Bosnia into basically a ghost town where everybody was in fear for their lives all the time, trying to dodge sniper fire, dodge artillery. Eyewitness accounts from that era have described some of the most vivid, atrocious scenes that you can imagine, including like young boys shot while kicking balls around, grandmothers shot like walking around, mothers shielding their infants in vain while they're being shot at. It was literal hell, like an absolute hellscape that comes from the most deep bowels of human imagination. Incomprehensible horrors taking place on a daily basis. Now, according to these allegations, opportunistic Serbian militias allegedly monetized this terror by selling out essentially like passes for people who were foreigners with money to come in there and snipe people on these human safaris. And these folks were doing it for personal gratification, or just to pay for the experience because it might have been, quote, exciting for them. Now, the person who basically reignited and reinvigorated this pursuit of this buried scandal is a guy by the name of Ezio Gavazzini, who's a Milan-based investigative journalist and novelist known for his deep dives into terrorism and organized crime. In the mid-1990s, Gavazzini first encountered whispers of, quote, sniper tourists in Italian outlets, which reported unverified rumors of Western thrill seekers that were joining the fray in order to find or to pay for risky, exciting things to them. Even though this is like quite literally disgusting. But the thing that really got this Italian investigative journalist to jump in on this thing all the way was this 2022 Slovenian documentary named Sarajevo's Safari by a guy by the name of Miran Zupanik, who directed it. Now, the film kind of like melded anonymous testimonies with a lot of archival footage of the Battle of Sarajevo and exposed how wealthy foreigners, far from ideological warriors, came in and paid money to these Serbs just to commit these horrible war crimes, treating the siege like a twisted vacation, paying Serb soldiers for guided manhunts. Now, Gavazzini put together a 17-page dossier for this thing, and he got some breakthrough key information from a Bosnian military intelligence officer who went by a pseudonym that I won't list, but the guy claimed to have interrogated a captured Serb in 1993, revealing there were Italian vacationers there that were paying for this stuff. The officer apparently recounted how Bosnian intelligence uncovered the scheme of tourists flying in from Trieste to Belgrade, then being ferried to sniper nests, and relaying details to Italy's SISMI military intelligence in 1994. Now, there were some of these trips that were stopped because Italian agents reportedly intervened, halting the trips within months for some of it, saying, quote, we've put a stop to it and there won't be any more safaris. Now, Gavazzini's report basically paints these people as, quote, rich people who went there for fun and personal satisfaction, meaning that these people were paying money because it was fun for them to have the opportunity to shoot at civilians because they weren't allowed to do it in their home country. But essentially, you're paying to commit homicide during a war I can't imagine what those people must have been like in their home lives. In any case, Gavazzini estimates that up to 100 such individuals, including a Milanese cosmetic surgery clinic owner, paid for these trips, although none are yet publicly named. Now, by January of 2025, Gavazzini filed his complaint with Milan's prosecutor's office and was supported by lawyers Nicola Brigida and former magistrate Guido Salvini, who were experts in international war crimes. Now, Salvini, who once prosecuted the, quote, God's judgment mafia killings, was like a massive part of this as far as like the legal heft, the weight of this legally. Now, in addition to this, there was a parallel report came from Benjamina Karsic, who was Sarajevo's mayor from 2021 to 2024, who had long been collecting survivor testimonies on the siege's like scars that it left. He said, quote, an entire team of tireless people are fighting to have this complaint heard. Now, logistically, these things were unfortunately pretty efficient because they did it so many times. And they were more closer in relation to organized tours, like war tours, than chaotic war profiteering, because they actually like put some effort in building out a logistics chain to support these things, because it must have been so financially lucrative for these people personally. Now, a lot of the participants were gun enthusiasts or just adrenaline junkies who had enough money to pay for this, and they would rendezvous in Trieste, who is a stone's throw from the Yugoslav border. And then from there, they would hop on private flights or drives that would lead them to Belgrade, which is like the Serbian hub. And then the army of Republika Srpska would escort them, essentially. Sometimes the groups would be, a dozen in number, and then they would be shuttled to elevated Serbian positions that are encircling Sarajevo. They'd be handed sniper rifles or allowed to bring their own, like one American boar hunting weapon. And they would be positioned somewhere around the city to fire down on the exposed roads, down onto the civilians. Now, apparently the, quote, fun was tiered by victim. There was an extra premium that people would pay for children who were particularly vulnerable, obviously. Men in uniforms fetched higher bids as legitimate targets. Women and elders were cheaper. The Serbian handlers allegedly tallied these kills like game trophies, and then the tourists would execute these kills, and they'd be back at their home days later in their bougie life as a doctor or businessman or socialite. There was no like political favors involved with this. It was just, quote, personal satisfaction, as Gavazzini chillingly phrased it. Now, there were some corroborating stories that supported these claims in testimonies. For example, in 2007, a former U.S. Marine, John Jordan, told the ICTY of, quote, tourist shooters arriving with novice handling of weapons, firing pot shots at civilians for their own gratification. A Russian writer by the name of Eduard Limonov, who is a known provocateur, was photographed in 1994 alongside Karadzik, grinning while looking out over the carnage. Now, a prosecutor by the name of Alessandro Gobis, who's a counterterrorism specialist, now leads the probe. He's now collaborating with the Carabinieri's elite Raggruppamento Operativo Speciale unit, which, bottom line, I can't pronounce it, but they tackle organized crime and extremism. So he's teaming up with some folks that can tackle organized crime and extremism to try to root out these folks that paid for, like, combat tourism, essentially, back in the 90s. Now, there's a whole bunch of like potential witnesses that are still alive. Obviously, this wasn't super long ago. It was about 30 years ago. So, 33 years ago, where they could still speak with some of these folks. But everybody that's involved in the legal process are saying that this is a pretty well substantiated claim and that there is enough evidence to lead to serious investigations to identify who these culprits were, who these people were that were doing this stuff. Now, Gavazzini hopes that he can locate at least one or two or maybe 10 and hopefully lead them to trial. The Bosnian consulate in Milan also wants to make sure that this happens, especially since it was their people that were being shot. A spokesperson for the Bosnian consulate said, quote, "We are impatient to discover the truth about such a cruel matter in order to close a chapter of history. I'm in possession of certain information I will be sharing with the investigators," end quote. Now, this story has exploded all over the internet, including the BBC, The Guardian, El País, UPI. It's been spread everywhere. New York Post. And there have been people talking about this all over the place, talking about, quote, bloodthirsty war tourists. So from what it's been described as, they're not just doing this for like political theater or legal theater. They're doing this because they want to bring these people to justice who committed war crimes as civilians. They weren't even combatants. They weren't soldiers. They were just people with money that wanted to kill people for money. And it is one of the most warped versions of voyeurism and tourism I've ever heard of. I mean, I'm sure that there's worse stuff happening on the internet, like the dark web, but this is bad enough. So hopefully they can come to a determination to bring these people to justice and throw them in jail for the rest of their lives. Anyway, crazy story, but I thought that you would be interested in hearing about that. All right, guys, that's it for the daily roll-up for today. I appreciate you watching the video all the way through to completion. Believe it or not, it actually does help the channel when you watch a video to completion. So if you want to support the channel in other ways, you can like this video, you can leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can share this video with your friends and your family. And even if they're not your friends, share it with them too. And as always, I will see you in the next video.